I'm J.D. Jones, and I'm here to tell you about our newest book. I'm so excited about this one. It is called Discovering Jesus and the Old Testament. You know, the Bible tells us about God's big plan in history, how he created humans in order to dwell with them on earth and have them reign on earth. But things went a little awry in the garden, and ever since then, God has been revealing his plan to bring humans back into relationship with him so that he can dwell with them. And that's basically what we're going to be looking at in this book. We're going to see how God has revealed his plan. So let me take you over to chapter 1 and show you a little bit of what's in there. Here we are in chapter 1. Each of the chapters is set up this way. We've got the title here, the passage. This is Genesis 3, so it's the Old Testament passage that's going to tell us something about Jesus. And then the title down here tells us Jesus the serpent crusher. Well, Genesis chapter 3, it just so happens, tells us that the woman Eve is going to bear a seed, and we'll get into what that means when we get into the chapter, or an offspring, we could call him, who is going to one day crush the serpent that deceived her in the fall. And then it tells us here the hope. Each chapter is centered around one hope. And in this case, chapter 1 is the hope of evil's end. So that's a pretty big hope. I'm sure every one of you has experienced evil just as I have. And you're looking forward to one day having evil being completely ended. Then over here we have the bookmark that shows us the key verse. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. This is from Genesis 3:15, the first prophecy about Jesus. So that's a really wonderful verse right there. This is Carla Dornicker's art again, just absolutely beautiful. Now, once again, we've divided the chapters into 5 daily lessons, and each lesson can be done in about 20 to 25 minutes. The first daily lesson, usually a little less, but about 20 to 25 minutes. And the daily lessons are further divided into time eras. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that. You see right here, there's a little icon here of Eve. Well, we've got 9 different time eras. 9 different time eras. And I've made a little chart for you. I wanted to put this in the book, but there wasn't enough room. But it's available free for download. Just go to the book website and click the link over to my website and you can get that and download it. In fact, there's in all 7 timelines I've made for you to go with the book. So those will help you a lot. So it gives us a little summary about what happened in Eve's day in this chapter, since this chapter is primarily about what happened in Eve's day. And it's got our main reading. And then the day one lesson always ends with this devotional by Pam Farrell. And I know if you've done any of her devotionals before, you know how exuberant and exciting and encouraging they are. And this one's called A Walk with Christ. And each one of these is how to put into practice what we learn about Jesus, how that affects our lives today, and then how to apply that in our lives today, what it means for us today. Then we have our daily lessons. And as usual, at all our books, we have sidebars for people who have extra time and maybe have been Christians longer, and so they're eager for a little more depth. But you won't miss anything important to the lesson, to what you're learning, if you skip the sidebars. So it's totally fine to skip them. But for people who want that extra detail and who want that extra depth, they're there for you if you have the time for them. So let me take you over to the next one. Oh, okay. And then every chapter, as I mentioned, has divisions into the time eras. So for Jesus being the serpent crusher, there's a little more revealed in the future, at future times. So that, for instance, we have here the promises made originally to Eve. And then in Abraham's day, we find out that God wants to calls Abraham the prophet and tells him he's going to be setting aside his descendants as a special people who can be his people and who can tell the whole world about God and how to be with God. So we find out a little bit more about that. And then in Moses' day, about 500 years after, we find the descendants of Abraham coming to the promised land, and Moses on God's instructions, setting up a tabernacle that has garden motifs. And you'll learn a lot about that. And they reflect back to the Garden of Eden and what happened in the Garden of Eden and what God's going to do. So that's pretty exciting. I think you're gonna like that. It really excites me. So then that's Moses' day, and then David's day. About another 500 years, King David lived, and he wanted to build a temple for God, and God had him put together the plans for it, though he said that his descendant, his son, was going to be the one to build the temple. And it again had garden motifs that you'll see, and it's pretty exciting. And then over here, the major prophets' day. Well, over time, the kings didn't keep up what they were supposed to do, and the people that left the Lord, they didn't stay walking with him like they should. And God sent 4 prophets in particular to warn the people and call them back to worship him and to live by his commands that they agreed to live by. And when they didn't, he said, okay, we're going to have to send you into exile. Now, the 4 prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And in the Bible, we call them the major prophets because major means long. They wrote the most prophetic words. And so in their day, we learn about the ending of the kingdom and an exile for 70 years, and then a return that will come. And we also get all kinds of prophecies about what's going to happen, about well, I don't want to fill you in too much right now, but how God is going to be creating a new heavens and earth, and how he's going to restore what was lost in the garden. So that's real exciting there. So these prophets begin to tell us about that. And just as they foretold, the exile lasted 70 years. Then they came back into the land, but they had no king of their own. They built another temple. And we're going to call this the Second Temple's Day. And there were some more prophets that told more things about how God was going to end the mess that Satan made of things, the deceiver, and how he's going to bring in the new heaven and earth and reverse all that. And so that's all really exciting. So that's those eras. So after we get to there, then we come to Jesus's day, and there we get to see how Jesus fulfilled the verses while he was on earth, how he began to fulfill the promises that we saw him make earlier. And then we move over to God with us today. And this takes us in, this section here shows us what the New Testament tells us, what it reveals more about how Jesus is fulfilling and will continue to fill the various promises that we find in the Old Testament regarding Jesus. And it tells us how we should therefore live. Most of the chapters get into the book of Hebrews. The letter of Hebrews, more than any other book in the Bible, explains how Jesus fulfilled Old Testament promises. So most of the chapters will jump into Hebrews, and we'll look at a little bit there, and then we'll look at how we should live, how the Bible calls us to live because of what God has given us. And then we have over here God with us forever. We jump over to the book of Revelation, which in the case of chapter 1 tells us about Satan's final end, Jesus' final defeat of Satan, and the eternity that we have. And that leads us very naturally into God with us now, which is a time of worship using psalms that celebrate what it is that God is doing, his defeat of evil and his love for us and his plan to bring us into being with him in eternity. Then we have Carla's devotional, and this time she calls it the Heart and Art of Worship, and she did lovely little devotionals again, all about worship and using art and other creative means to worship God. And finally, we have the key verse, all illustrated, drawn by Carla, and oh my goodness, you guys, she did such a wonderful job. These illustrations are amazing, and if you want to memorize the verses, coloring these while you're repeating the verse is the way to do it. That'll do it. So every chapter goes into the various time eras to tell us what it is we're learning about Jesus in the Old Testament and how that affects us today and what it means for our tomorrow. So be sure to go over to my website, use the links on the book website that's listed in here, or go to my website, www.jeanniejones.net, and you can download this and the other timelines that I've created for you, and that'll help you follow everything. And honestly, when I look at all of the ways that the Old Testament revealed Jesus to us, I am just in awe. I am in awe of God's wonderful plan, how much He loves us, how much He cares for us, the many, many ways that He showed us Jesus so that we could recognize Him and so that we could understand Him and understand God's plan. And it's really amazing to me, and I think you'll be in awe of it all, just as I am. Anyway, I look forward to being with you and going through discovering Jesus in the Old Testament. Thank you.